This is a breakout session. Thank your way to more and bigger gifts, research-based strategies to raise more money from existing donors. I'm Emily Spranger. I'm INN's Network Philanthropy Prospect Researcher, and I'll be hosting this session today along with our presenter, Diane Riemann. A couple things before we jump right in. I want to give Diane an introduction. She is a president of MajorDonors.com. I will drop that link in the chat later. MajorDonors.com helps smaller nonprofits launch major gifts programs and provides capital campaign counsel. Diane is an acclaimed trainer and coach. She's an AFP member, and she's a coach of INN's Major Gift Cohort program, so she might look familiar to some of you. So welcome, Diane. Thank you for joining us. Before we jump in, just a couple housekeeping items. I mentioned this earlier, but this is an interactive session. So if you have a thank you letter available, we highly recommend keeping it handy. We're going to give you some hands-on tips and tricks, and it'd be super helpful to have that right in front of you. We're ready to hand it over to Diane. So take it away, Diane.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for being here, everyone. Those of you I know, those of you I'm meeting for the first time, how exciting. Jumping right in, I do want to let you know that I'm on screen share, so I can't see the chat. So Emily will be the reader of the chat, and we will be using the chat during the session. So today's 45 minutes is all about how is it possible that the two words thank you and something seemingly as innocuous as a thank you letter and the whole process of thanking can have such an influence on how much money you raise. Let's find out. I want to start by introducing you to some of the people whose work I'm going to be referencing, just so you have a picture. I know it's hard when I'm referencing some of the research and you have no clue who I'm talking about. So for just quick frame of reference, you can see I'm referencing some of Professor Adrian Sargent's work. He's done a huge amount of work on what does it mean about donor loyalty. And then he now has formed the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy with Professor Jen Sheng, who is the world's first PhD in philanthropy, looking at the psychology of philanthropy. Lisa Sargent, I didn't even know she was affiliated with the Institute because I know her very individually through her Lisa Sargent Consulting. All of these people and some of their work and sites are referenced at the back of the presentation in the resources. And then last, certainly but not least, Penelope Burke, who has for 20 years been doing research by literally asking donors what they think. She's now communicated with over 300,000 donors. Her signature book is called Donor-Centered Fundraising, now in its second edition. And before I get to the quick agenda, I want to say I am taking a little bit of liberty with the word thank you. So we're literally going to at times be talking about thank you in the traditional sense. And at other times, we're going to be talking more about a thank you process that includes reporting back to donors. And as we'll learn today, how important it is to do that before we present a new opportunity. That's the lingo I use in replace of making another ask, because I always think what we're doing is giving the donor an opportunity to do something that's going to make them feel great. So what we're looking at today is some theory and research and also some technique with a particular focus on why the big deal about first-time donors. And to get to that topic, first chat. So I'd like you all to chat in. What is your donor retention rate? And just as importantly, the word no if you don't know it. So let's see some chat happening, and Emily will just give us a feel for how many no's versus how many know your donor retention rate percent. If you're on a board, any of the nonprofits you serve on, does that ever get discussed? You can estimate, we're not holding you to it. Do you have any sense of the nonprofits that you work for or work with, what their donor retention rate is, or do you not? And what are we seeing, Emily?
Mostly no's. A couple,
Mostly no's.
yeah, a couple, we have it, just don't have it in front of us. But
Okay.
mostly no's.
Mostly no's. Not surprising, because look where we are in terms of donor retention. So we tolerate over half of our donors disappearing every year. Goodbye to over 50% of our donors. But even more striking is the red area of the slide. Jump down there with me. New donor retention, and this is why I'm going to spend a lot of time on first-time donors, was 19.3%. That means over 80%, over 80% of all new donors who made a gift last year went away. And just so you know, this is not just because of the pandemic. Actually, during the pandemic, overall giving increased. And in fact, at the top of the slide, you see Dr. Adrienne Sargent bemoaning the fact of like the totally unacceptable prior 70% loss of new donors. So whether it got worse during the pandemic because of the pandemic, the fact is it was atrocious before the pandemic. Add to that the fact that donor loyalty, meaning retaining your donors, has a geometric impact on the value of your fundraising database because of the compounding that happens. So the 50% number, increasing the lifetime value of your fundraising database by 50%, which is striking, right? If you were at $1 million, you'd now be at 1.5 million, that Adrienne Sargent and Jen Chang cite in their book, is actually on the low side. If we look at Penelope Burke has an example, it all depends on assumptions. She has an example in her book of that value being at 149%, and she's not the only person finding that. So whatever the right answer is, the bottom line is that increasing donor retention, which of course you need to know what it is for starters, has a profound impact on fundraising results over time. So what are some of the drivers of donor loyalty? The big three are satisfaction and quality of service from the development team, commitment, and I'm going to point out a couple of these bullets, and trust, meaning, did you do what you said you were going to do, and are you communicating in ways that match donor expectations? But back to this bullet list, I just want to point out two. So one of the loyalty factors is risk, meaning no sense that not giving will matter. So the flip of that is, how do we make it clear that every gift matters? And the other one I want to point out is this concept of multiple engagement creating loyalty, not just by big steps like volunteering, but also by little steps, every two-way interaction, responding to a survey, interacting on social media, all of that engenders loyalty. And now we see what donors want from Penelope Burke, who again has been surveying donors for 20 years. And what is really interesting about her work, that she will tell you herself, is how consistent the donor answers have been over the last 3 years. Over the last 20 years. I translate the 3 points she's making about what donors want into, yes, receiving prompt and meaningful acknowledgments whenever they make a gift. 2, being clear what their gift's going to be used for. This does not mean the gift needs to be restricted. It means they need to be clear what the gift is for in some scope that's narrower than your entire mission. Like, let's make the environment better. Too big. And then understanding that you did it, that you actually accomplished it. It doesn't have to be a report like in school. There are a lot of ways to report back, and we'll talk about some of those. Those 3 things, it doesn't sound all that complicated, but clearly we're not executing on them, or we would not have 80% of our first-time donors falling off the cliff. So from a concept point of view, again, the focus on first-time donors, one of the things I know a lot of places do is they're focusing on gift size. So they're treating the $50 donor very differently from the $500 donor, very differently from the $5,000 donor. And that just starts us off on the wrong path, because donors themselves, not surprisingly, tell us that most of them don't give us their biggest and best gift first time out of the gate, right? A little bit of a test. So your first steps with first-time donors make all the difference, and treating them equally, giving them the kind of feel-good, personalized customer support will make the huge difference. So here's the first technique that's been documented by Penelope Burke. Some of you may or may not have heard of this. Calling first-time donors within 48 hours, and I can already feel the cringing through the Zoom. Oh, we can't possibly do that. Okay, that's okay. All my work is with smaller nonprofits. We're going to talk about, all right, what can you do? But let's look at what happens when you get close to doing this. The research is based on a board member making a call within 48 hours. And what happened was the next set of gifts increased by 40%. 40%, that's a lot. And in the second wow down here is something that's almost more unexpected. I was shocked when I heard this. Leaving a voicemail inspired donors to give again as much as the live call did, well within 1%. So leaving the voicemail inspired 33% of donors to give again, 34% with the live call. So spending 30 seconds of your time, leaving a short voicemail, and we want it to be short, and there's a sample of a thank you voicemail at the back in the appendix of this deck, has that level of impact. Okay, you can't do 48 hours. Okay, you can't have your board. Do what you can do. You can see my final slide is a mantra. My mantra is doing something is better than doing nothing. What we know from Penelope is that donors appreciate calls up to 60 days out. But imagine making a gift and 60 days out, you barely remember that you made it. So really, really, really try to reel that in. And let's pretend it's a staff calling, not the board member or a volunteer or whomever. The difference is about 10 to 15%. So you're still getting a lot of bang for that call, no matter who makes it. I've known people, one of my first clients was the vice president of communication. It was membership. They hadn't done any individual separate fundraising. There was no development director. And she went off and spent 15 minutes a day. She used it as a break to call donors and say thank you. And of course, I have the one anecdote story that ends with the donor, after speaking with her, sending her the $10,000 check and eventually giving over $100,000 that year. Now that's anecdotal and that is not always going to happen. But we know 40% higher gifts. We know that as a fact across the board. And now on to the thank you letter. The thank you letter. Think about this. The thank you letter as the single most important and influential communication a donor ever receives. Who thinks about their thank you letter like that? Right? It's that important. So let's go with chat again. Pull out your thank you letters, any thank you letter, any standard thank you letter that you use for anything. And let's chat in just the first 3 words after the dear Jamal or the dear Susan or the dear whomever. What are the word 1, word 2, word 3? And Emily will let us know what she's seeing. What are you seeing, Emily?
Nothing yet. We can wait
Okay,
a minute or two for those to come in.
Come on, guys. Chat it in there. First 3 words.
Thank you for your.
Thank you for. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We received your gift of.
Thank you. Only first 3 words. Thank you.
On behalf of.
On
thank
behalf
you for.
Yep, keep it. 30 seconds more. Come on.
On behalf of, thank you so, on behalf of earlier
Great.
this year, yeah.
We got something else. We got it earlier this year. So here's the deal. Thank you for those of you who chatted, because you really helped me make the point. Over 80% of thank you letters start with on behalf of, or thank you for, or something very much like that. Guess what? Those, hate to say it, are not inspiring start. You can see some other do nots here, but I want to jump you to what we do want. We're looking for a letter that feels personal and heartfelt. I love from Lisa Sargent the language, a sparkling first sentence. Now, this sample is actually me trying to relate this to one of you hiring a new fellow. I may or may not be super sparkling, but I think you'll get the drift. So we always want to be using a comma up at the front, and typically, especially if we're email, it's first name unless the donor has told you they want to be referred to more formally. So here's an example. Picture Joseph, an institution himself as the owner of iconic Franklin Square Pizza, speaking a bit hesitantly into the microphone, and then becoming unaware of the camera and the reporter as the minutes tick by, captivating you with his story. Thanks to you, it won't be long before our new fellow starts visiting Pittsburgh's diverse neighborhoods and listening to the many untold stories like Joseph's. The applications for the fellowship are starting to roll in. You are sparking the next generation of journalists and local storytellers. We can hardly wait, etc. And I took the time to read this because this is a key focal point of today's session. So the idea, and I don't know how well I executed, but I was going for this feeling of it's a personal conversation. It's not stilted and formal. The line, you are sparking the next generation of journalists and local storytellers. I was debating whether to lead with that, could have led with that. I started more with what I call a story picture, a one-line story picture, where in a sentence, I'm allowing the reader, the donor, to picture something. Signed by, important, signed by high-level leadership, include contact information. I promise you they won't get called often. There is, interestingly, a debate about using the PS. Lisa Sargent says, use it. It is always the most second red line, so that applies to outbound appeals too. No, says Penelope Burke, if you've done all the other stuff in the letter right, you don't need the PS test. You can make up your own mind. And then the IRS receipt, which, if you're thanking online, you absolutely want to separate as the donation receipt and just have the thank you letter be the thank you letter. It's harder when you're using direct paper. If you can, put an extra slip in with the IRS information. If you have to, okay, it goes at the bottom. So this communication, again, the most important and influential communication I want to suggest is really deserving of your attention. And the way to get it going is through that sparkling first sentence. So I'd actually like to take a little bit of time right now, just a couple of minutes, and have you, the most sophisticated group of writers I've ever done this presentation to, I want you to spend 3 minutes writing a sparkling first sentence for your organization. If you're not in an organization, but you're here because you're on a board or you're a philanthropist or whatever, pick one of the organizations whose mission you love and write their sparkling first sentence. Go. Let's start. And let's start then with Jacqueline's, and anyone else who's comfortable chatting in your sparkling first sentence. We'll have Emily read some of them to give you a feel for what you all are saying. So let's start, Emily, please.
Great. This is from Jacqueline. Earlier this year, Underscore News published a difficult and complex story about the Choctaw Nation and the freedmen in Oklahoma and the question of identity. Who belongs or not to the Choctaw Nation, how tribal enrollment is decided, and what's at stake.
Okay.
Our next one from Sonia. You are saving democracy. Yes, your support of Voice of OC puts you into an exclusive group of community members, people who have stepped up and invested in real, local, and nonpartisan news.
Thank you.
One from Meg. Your generous donation is going to make a big impact in Orange County today.
Okay.
From Robin. Your gift has come at such an important time.
Okay.
And from Aaliyah, I'm sorry for not pronouncing your name right, from Public Source. No one has ever asked Reverend Dale Snyder why his church, the oldest Black church in Pittsburgh, has been torn down.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to stop. Only thank you all, only due to time, since we have limited time.
Yes.
So let me go back one. And so the question was paper or email. If we had more time, I was going to ask you all to guess the percentage of total giving that comes online versus on paper. And there doesn't have to be a matchup. I know it's INN. I know you do Newsmatch. I know you're mostly online. But nevertheless, it's good to know what's happening as you grow. Because the answer is shocking to some, almost as shocking as the importance of the thank you letter. Up until this year, the pandemic finally put us over the 10% mark, meaning up until this year, over 90% of monies raised in the US was coming through mail, paper, in response to paper, not online, not online. This year, Blackbaud follows this. We made it to 12.9%, a big jump because of the pandemic and online giving. So just so you know, on the giving side, online is not the dominant force. I know it's what many of you are doing, especially as startups, and I get how efficient it is, and I get how wonderful Newsmatch is. Penelope Burke then says, actually, independent of how you gave, if you were thanked with paper, 73% of donors said they were happy being thanked on paper. And the remainder said they preferred an email thank you. So the real answer is just kind of ask your donors. Some donors actually prefer paper. Others, I understand, for environmental reasons, etc., don't. So you can send this thank you letter either way. Certainly, if a donor gave you not online, you'd want to thank them not online. The question becomes, if the donor gave online, do you want to thank them on paper, or do you even have their address? If you're going to do it online, you'd want to, in the subject line, maybe doing, thank you for John, like personalize the subject line if you can, and then go right in, not as an attachment. And it needs to be not through constant contact or any other reply vehicle. It needs to be personal. It needs to be from someone's email, right? Because otherwise you've depersonalized it. Think about the paper thank you, right? It's coming in an envelope to you personally, right? You see who sent it to you. They signed it, right? So you have to be careful with email that so easily depersonalizes, not to do that. And I understand the time commitment we're talking about. And again, do the best you can, knowing what you're hearing here and knowing about the impact that it has on giving. Any other questions before I keep going?
I was muted, apologies. Not at the moment. We might have a couple for the end, but we're good.
Right, okay. So here's a review of essentially what you saw in the thank you letter of what we are doing. And again, I'm moving quickly to make sure we have time to cover and then take questions. Again, the IRS language, what I call the IRS language. The problem is once you put that IRS language into anything, it sort of turns even this fabulous communication into the IRS letter, right? Letter, I mean either email or paper, it doesn't matter. So when you can separate it is the answer. If not, bottom. No research on the impact of bottom versus separation that I've seen. Okay. So how do we engage this first-time donor even further? And the answer is a number of people like using a new donor welcome package that's going to go out like 3 to 4 weeks after the first-time donor makes their gift. And we're really trying to understand more about the donor's interests and preferences and create a bond. I will tell you, Penelope Burke says, as long as you do all the other steps, it is actually not necessary to do a welcome packet. So there's not total agreement on this. We always say, Tess, want to try it, especially if you're doing it via email. If you're going to do it via email, I'm suggesting that you control the length, that you don't send an overwhelming amount of information in any one email, but let them know this is one of a welcome series of 3, right? Little bit in each, and you let them know it's coming. I highlighted the donor interest survey because the more you can find out about your donors, what's important to them, what language they use, and how they want to be thanked and communicated with, right? We'll be able to segment on something other than gift size and something other on are they lapsed or not, right? Those are the 2 big segmentations everyone does, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg of the story. And why people lapse often has to do with us not following all these early stage steps, which I will summarize in a slide. I do want to point out that there is some urgency to all this. There is a tick-tock, meaning we know that getting the second gift in year 1 doubles the odds of the gift in year 2. So what we need to do is we need to balance needing to execute on thanking, letting the donor know what we did with their gift before we get to that second ask, right? That's the balance point. I also understand that some projects take a while to execute, right? You can't hire someone and get them going in 30 days. That's fine. That's fine. But we're really looking at within the first year, if possible. That's where the big difference is in terms of sort of lifetime value of money. I know he says even waiting 6 months can affect amounts and size, and it can. But again, more important is reporting back and not losing the donor, right? And to sort of say this point from Penelope Burke's side, why donors stop giving? And the first one is 69% of over-solicitation. Well, look how over-solicitation is defined, right? It's defined as being asked to give again before you understood what your last gift made happen. So yes, is it possible to barrage people to death? Yes, it is. But the barrage is perceived as happening if they don't know what's occurring with the money they already gave you. I know I've repeated this a lot, and I've said it a lot because we're not doing a good job of doing this, or we wouldn't be seeing what we see. For donors in general, this is now going beyond first-time donors, we're looking at the idea of thanking your donors 5 times during a year. And actually, the 5 times is down from the 7 times that's often advocated. And I actually, in my research, actually looked for the source of why 7 times is the right number. And I couldn't find it. I think somebody said it, and it just got picked up. And given that I do work with smaller nonprofits, 5 times I'm sure already seems like a lot to you. But when we think about doing a couple at the beginning, right after getting the gift, and then kind of a quarterly rhythm, which will depend on, when your projects get done. Like, when do you do something that a whole bunch of donors gave you money for? Whenever that's completed will drive the timing. But that's the idea of not thinking of thank you as, okay, somebody sends a gift, I send them a thank you letter, I am finished, but rather as an ongoing process. I'm cheating here. I am cheating, and I know it because I'm doing the kid thing. And I know this doesn't apply to you, but it's just an example of a way that you can thank donors that are a little different throughout the year. So this is from a student whose teacher received a gift through a service called Donors Choose. But imagine a reporter, a young reporter you've just hired, getting to work and having some sort of story to tell. But of course, this kid one ends with, thank you so much. And then he has a little gasps for breath. You should feel special. This task took me 2 hours to finish all 483 sows, which just cracked me up. Can you imagine being the donor who receives this, right? And so again, needs to be translated into your world, but just gives you some sense of it. Thank yous can come from all different sorts of people. I also want to point to personalized videos. There are now a number of platforms out there, BombBomb, Thank You, etc., that allow you to produce personalized videos to lots of different people so they look personalized. They do cost money. They're subscription-based, often based on the number of contacts. Have to decide, is the investment worth it for you? It's, again, not a substitute for the thank you letter, but another way to thank donors during the year, or if they make a second gift or whatever, certainly for major donors. And I just want to point out that I love Great News Paul for all its just unproduced beauty. What we don't want to do is send donors overproduced videos. We do know videos have very high open rates, right? Very high open rates still. So videos are good. We don't want to overproduce them. We want them personal and genuine and real. But I just wanted you to be aware of some of these platforms that are out there these days.
Diane, I'm just going to let you know we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, good, because I'm about at the end of my slides. So I'll have time for questions. So here, just putting it together would be a sequence for new annual fund donor where you see as quickly as possible a call, you don't have a number, a note, handwritten note, still gold standard. If you're doing everything via email, absolutely get that donation receipt, which should still at the front, doesn't have to have the sparkling sentence, but she'll should have a thank you. It shouldn't look like, you just bought office supplies. And then an actual thank you communication. As I say at the bottom, my little envelopes mean either e or mail, whatever you're doing, possibly a welcome, if not a welcome, possibly a donor survey, so a welcome packet, if not a welcome packet, possibly a donor survey about what's important to them about what you're doing, what's their big interest area, what language, what words do they use to describe you, because then in future communications, we want to play back the language that our donors are using, right? And how do you want to be communicated with for thank yous in general, letting the donors let you know. And then of course you have to have the database capacity to capture the information and do it. So don't be asking these kinds of questions if you can't then execute on the communications, doing it the way the donor wants, right? And then we have all different ways to report back, video, note cards, different people calling, etc. And at some point when we can, within the first year, we're asking for the second gift. We're going to acknowledge we're asking for the second gift because it feels good to a person when they hear, we know that you gave us that initial gift for which we're so grateful and we whatever during the year. And now we're asking you for a gift to next thing, right? You have to tell them still, what are you going to do with the gift? And it's a nice time to invite them. If you have a monthly giving program, it's a nice time to start inviting someone into the monthly giving program. And then you're going to continue to report back. The only note in the box is if for a major gift, the concepts are the same, but then you're going to start definitely contacting the person in Zoom and looking to have a visit on Zoom or in person, et cetera. And but the principles, the same principles apply in terms of making the donor feel good, engaging the donor, et cetera. And my last slide is, if you can't do everything, something is better than nothing. I promise you that if you start making thank you calls 15 minutes a day, you're going to find it a really nice break. I promise you that you may be able to recruit a couple of board members or volunteers to do the same. And that as you learn about your donors, you are going to see your fundraising results tick up. So what I'm suggesting is that you all compute your donor retention rate as of today, your first time donor rate who gave a first time gift 2 years ago, and then the following year, and your overall rate. And that's what you're comparing against, right? That's what you're comparing against is yourself. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your work. And I hope these tips will help you thrive even more. So I'm going to stop share now and take questions for our remaining time.
Great. Thank you so much, Diane. That was so informative. I think our biggest question is if you'd be providing the slide deck after. Yes. Okay. I just wanted to confirm because there was
yes,
so
I will.
much
I'm sorry. I did a little quick edit at the end, so I haven't sent that to Emily yet, but Emily, yeah. I will send you the slide deck.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. We did have a couple questions that came in. I'm just going to go from top to bottom here. So our first one was, do you have any suggestions on thanking recurring donors specifically?
Yes. So you want to thank recurring donors, not every time, once a year, at least once a year, it would be the minimum. And you want to acknowledge that they're a recurring donor. And just like all other donors, you want to be clear to them what their recurring gift has made possible and what it will be making possible going forward. So aside from the end of year summary and all the administrative stuff, again, it's that heartfelt, just like we saw, sparkling first sentence, thank you once a year to recurring donors.
Awesome. Thanks. Is a special donor first invitation to a public event considered a thank you?
Yes, I think it's part of the process. It's not replacing the thank you letter, but I think an invitation as an acknowledgement of their being part of the community, I think is.
Great. And then another question. I'd welcome some insight on how to handle volume. I can't imagine how I could handwrite personal notes to all new donors instead of new donors at a certain level. It's far beyond what I could handle. They do all get letters though, just not handwritten. So any insight you have about like handling, the stack that kind of comes up on your desk, and then any ideas about what you would do if you don't have phone numbers or email addresses for most donors?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to do the second one first.
Cool.
So I am going to counter, I know some of what you're being taught about friction. Well, I'm not countering what you're being taught. I get the concept of friction, meaning the less we ask, the more people we're going to get. But what you're seeing here is the sort of trade-off. When people say to you, oh, well, just collect email. Yeah, that's easy for them to say. They don't end up as the person in my seat saying, oh, but look what's happening. You have all these emails. Maybe you have 10 or 20% more people because all you asked for was emails. But guess what? 80% of them are going away because you cannot communicate with them. So I'm going to say, up front, consider adding a little friction and at least getting a phone number. That's what I'm going to say, right? Potentially adding some friction because there's a cost to frictionless, a cost to frictionless. If you don't have anything, here you are now, you don't have anything, I suggest all you can do really is try to donor survey and try to get, and in the survey, gather some of that, can we have you have to then ask for it in a much more direct way, and the response is not likely to be great, but you end up kind of stuck. If you're not getting at least phone number up front. Once a donor makes a gift, hopefully at that point, you're capturing address, right? So, okay, back to the volume question. Writing notes takes a really long time. So having phone numbers is what truly allows for volume, because then you can get a group of people helping you. I mean, you can with notes, but think about, again, knowing that leaving a voicemail, and most of the time that's what you're going to be doing, right? People see a strange number, they won't pick up even if they're there half the time. Knowing that a 30-second voicemail has such an impact, I'm going to say over time, what you'd want to do is get phone numbers so you can have groups of people call. Now, if you're like many places, right, donations don't come in evenly throughout the year. You get crunched November, December, and then the hangover to January from the December ones. And so that's when you may want to be able to recruit some volunteers to really help you. If you're going to prioritize, I mean, then you're going to be doing, what I don't have any magic for prioritization, right? It ends up prioritizing to the higher gifts, because what else? You have no other criteria to use. So there's sort of no true magic once you have to start prioritizing. The magic is in not having to prioritize, and at least being able to contact. Let's pretend you're doing 0 calls right now or 0 notes right now. Well, doing 10% is better than no percent. Like maybe you have a volunteer committee you put together who will write notes if that's all you have. And so, you can start doing 10 or 20% of your donors.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we are at our time, but one more question has come in from Meg. So just some quick thoughts. They don't require a physical address on their donation form, and at the recommendation of the leaders of the Facebook Accelerator program, they don't. They said that people don't expect physical letters if they donate online. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay. I think people don't expect physical letters if they donate online, but I can tell you, as the major gift cohort person, that you are then unable to research people. Forget thank you letters. If you start to want to do major gift work after, addresses are key to doing prospect research. So I just would say keep that in mind. Again, I realize the accelerator is accelerating, but I also think the accelerator is accelerating, and we have really bad donor retention rates. So there needs to be a balance. And again, if a donor gives online, it is fine to send them a thank you back online. Just separate the donation receipt from something that's clearly this heartfelt personal thank you letter from someone high up in the organization.
Awesome. One more quick question.
Sure, I'm fine. If
cool.
anyone else wants to say, that's fine.
Yeah, and I'm going to drop the Zoom link to our next session in the chat, but this is super quick. What's a good way to collect addresses for people already in our database?
Yeah, I believe that there's services out there. I believe that Jeffrey Wolverton at INN, who's working with the major gift cohort, is looking at what's possible there. So because this question comes up on the major gift side. So I think some decisions need to be made. Well, we'll find out what resources are available to do that, and also what do we want to collect on the inbound side.
Great.
I think.
Well, thank you so much, Diane. That was super helpful, super informative. Thanks so much again for joining us.